As we journey through this series of Bite-Sized Bible, the intention has been that we would get to know God better and that our relationship with Him would go deeper and go stronger, that we would live as effective disciples of Jesus. Today we're going to develop a new aspect of Bite-Sized Bible, a new theme, and we're going to spend some time thinking about the fatherhood of God. The danger sometimes, though, is that when we talk about discipleship, we think of it as an action rather than a relationship, and we can miss the value and the importance of having a closer, more intimate relationship with God. The fatherhood of God is a theme that is quite central throughout the Bible, but it's one that often we struggle with when we think about a relationship with God, particularly if our relationship with our natural fathers hasn't been a great one. It makes it difficult for us to relate to God as our Father. In the Old Testament, we see that God is revealed in His holiness, we see His uniqueness, we see Him being revealed as Yahweh, Jehovah, that loving Creator who desires a relationship with us. And then when we move into the New Testament, we suddenly see Jesus addressing God as Father. And in John 14 verse 9, Jesus actually says that if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. And he goes on to say that if we have this relationship with God, then the Father will come and He will make His home with us. So the invitation is to a relationship with God. I'm going to take some time to unpack this idea of a relationship with Father and what the fatherhood of God is about. But before we can do that, I want to lay some foundations to help us get the most out of this series. The idea of God as Father can take different forms. We can think of God as the Father of creation. Now, that's not a title that's used of God in the Old Testament, but verses like Malachi 2 verse 10 point to this sense of God having His creation under His control and under His authority, and this sense of God loving all that He has made. A second aspect of the fatherhood of God might be that God is seen as the Father of Israel. Passages like Psalm 103 and Isaiah 43 give this sort of development of the covenant relationship that we learnt about in Genesis 15 and 17, where God introduces that He wants to have this relationship with humanity, and it becomes a committed relationship, which is why the unfaithfulness of the Israelites probably hurt God so much. The third aspect of the fatherhood of God might be seen as the Father of Jesus. Jesus refers to God as Father, and Father refers to Jesus as Son, and we see this beautiful relationship of the Trinity being presented. We saw that in Genesis 1, where God was introduced as Elohim, which is a plural name of God. So even though the Bible presents God as one, the language is of plural. So one of the most difficult concepts of Christianity is the Trinity. That's a whole bite-sized Bible series on its own, which we're not going to look at here. But the relationship that we would have as relating to God as Father would be different to the one that Jesus and the Father has as part of the Trinity. What I want us to focus on, though, is this sense of Jesus wanting us to relate to God as Father, that sense of Him being the Father of believers. Jesus reveals the fatherhood of God and develops this new covenant relationship. Remember, God entered into covenant relationship with Abraham in Genesis 15 and 17. We have the amazing invitation to be part of that covenant relationship, the new covenant. And to help us understand that, we need to go deeper in what it means to know God as our Father. In John chapter 1, we see this invitation that whoever believes in God is given the right to be part of the family of God, given right to belong to the family of God and be called children of God. And that points us to the first aspect of the fatherhood of God, that of salvation. But salvation on its own, God could have given us salvation without the other aspects of fatherhood. He could have given us a right standing with God, forgiveness, and that sense of being legally right with God, without having the opportunity to be part of a family or to know Him more intimately as Father. But before we start to lay those foundations, let's just begin with this idea that we can relate to God as Father. And let me ask you the question, is that something that you struggle with? Over the next few sessions, let's try and open up our hearts and our minds to the idea that the experience that we've maybe had of fathers is different to the one that God wants us to know, where he wants us to have an intimate, loving relationship with a God who thinks we're worth dying for.